So welcome everyone to this afternoon's session where we are talking about process health and ownership and engagement in your business. So for those that might not have met us before, Craig and I are two of the founders of Skore. We've both been working in and around the BPM process improvement space for I don't know, 20 plus years, working with all sorts of businesses around this stuff. So everything from startups to multinational FTSE 100 companies. So today, yes, if you can't see us on the videos, that's what Craig and I look like, or at least look like a few years ago. So today we're going to be talking around the topic of process health, and just to tease you, we'll be introducing something new and exciting from the team here at Skore. We will be making time towards the end to take questions, comments, so you can save them up, you can put them into the chat. There's a QA widget thing as well, so chuck them in. We might not be able to sort of, juggle it and take questions as we go, but we'll definitely be saving time towards the end. And then after that, we'll tell you how you can find out more information about what we're sharing if you like what we see. So I think just because we have got a myriad of different people and some new faces, new names I don't recognise. Craig, I think before we get too much into the meat of the bones, could you give us a bit of a background about Skore, what's it about?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I'd keep it quite simple. I mean, Skore is a online or cloud-based platform for documenting, analysing, improving, collaborating, managing business processes. It's designed to be user-friendly and intuitive, so it can be used by virtually anyone within an organisation. But probably most commonly, we see teams using it for systems implementation, digital transformation, continuous improvement, compliance, quality, but even through to things like training, onboarding, and that sort of thing. So really anywhere where a team needs to, or an organization needs to manage process knowledge.
Brilliant, thank you. And what are people trying to achieve with Skore? What are some of the problems that they're looking to address?
I suppose in the most simple way, it's trying to build a process library that lasts in the organization. So most of our users are trying to standardize processes, store them centrally to make them easy to access for anyone who needs that information about how the processes work. But what they're doing is they're then trying to build a foundation for the future of the business. So, I mentioned training and onboarding. If you've got well-documented processes that everyone can access, then there's no reason why you can't train new people on those processes, or if you're making changes to how things work today, again, using those processes to train people. But even beyond that, it's that, that ongoing or continuous improvement piece. So whether you call your team continuous improvement, or you are quality led, for example, where continuous improvement is such an important piece of trying to make sure that you're delivering the right value to the customers. The key thing here is all about not just documenting the processes and then leaving them to gather dust, but it's about making them last. It's about making them sustain in the business so that you can keep using them. I mean, ultimately, it's about making sure that processes are fit for purpose, right? That they're always easy for people to find, they're always up to date, and they should just be easy to read for whichever person in the organization needs it.
Brilliant. So I don't think we've ever spoken to a business leader or manager that wouldn't agree that's a great thing to achieve, and try and aim for. Why do companies find it so hard to get to that point?
Yeah, I guess going back to the 20 years of experience, or I suppose you could say 40 years plus combined experience, I think you'll probably agree that the biggest challenge always seems to be engagement. It's engaging people across the organization. And I like to break that down into two parts. So there's the individual engagement. So me as an individual working within the organization, like, why should I care about the processes and whether the processes are kept up to date and they're available? But there's also the leadership side as well. Why do the leadership care about this? If I start with as an individual, when you go through that initial documentation exercise, for anyone who's done it, sometimes it can be a little bit painful, but generally it's quite cathartic, because it's often the first time that you've been involved in an exercise of actually really describing your processes, and it's often the first time where you've had a really good forum to explain all the things that don't necessarily work about the process, right?
Indeed,
So
yeah.
that can, that in itself, just getting that off your chest is quite a good feeling for many people. Whether anything happens with those problems or maybe suggested improvements is another thing. So engaging people at the beginning isn't so hard. It's that sustaining that engagement, which is the really difficult part. A process, unfortunately, although we might disagree with this, it's not super exciting, right? It's not really that interesting for most people. And processes don't really, not all, but most processes don't change a huge amount. So if you're going to look at a process or review a process on a fairly regular basis, your processes change quite incrementally and often small amounts. So you don't see big changes or impacts. So you end up kind of going, well, I'll wait and I'll look at it at a later date. And then, of course, over time, that process starts to change so much that by the time you do go and look at it again, it's so far out of date, you've got to start again. And then from a leadership perspective, and so I'm talking about the sort of exec level downwards, again, very exciting at the beginning of any sort of project like this, because there's a lot of investment of time and money. So it's often it's a sort of highlight to talk about. And the initial things that you're talking about is, well, how many processes have we captured? How many improvement opportunities have we identified? And that's fine. But again, from a leader, often a board member's attention span can be quite short-lived, and so once you get over that initial excitement, it's then difficult to stay engaged at that level. And of course, things like continuous improvement is often more preventative. So actually, continuous improvement teams, when they struggle to justify their existence, they're actually saving the organization from running into future problems. But that's not very exciting at a board level. And once all the processes have been captured and the initial opportunities have been found, it then becomes again difficult to sustain interest at that level.
So you used the word engagement quite a few times out there, and you sort of split it out into the sort of the higher level exec and individuals. How do you overcome that challenge of engaging individuals over the longer term then?
Well, the way I started to think about this problem is, I guess let's use an analogy of your health. Think about your personal health. If you think back I'll go about 20 years ago, but for some of us it might just be 5 or 6 or 10 years ago. But if you wanted to get fit, you don't just go for a run or eat a salad and go, well, I hope that's got me much healthier and fitter. It requires a sustained change in behavior, right? It requires short runs to begin with, or whatever exercise you choose, and doing that repeatedly over time. It requires you to eat healthy over a long period of time. And again, going back to 20 years ago, the only way or feedback mechanism you had were two things, I guess. One, probably a dodgy set of scales that you had in the bathroom, which, if you stood on them on a daily basis, wouldn't really indicate any change at all, or variability where you might actually be going up rather than down. And then, whether your trousers fit when you pull them on in the morning, right? And so it's quite hard to sustain the motivation to do that, because you're very difficult to see those changes. Whereas fast forward to today, and we all have fitness tracker watches. We've got our smartphones that we can record calorie intakes. And so what we now have is a huge amount of data available to us. The data was always there, but now we've got tools of collecting it. A huge amount of data that allows us to look at lots of different things, like your calorie intake. You can look at the miles that you're running. You can look at the calories you're burning from doing that. You can monitor your heart rate, your sleep patterns, and these sensors and data collection that we're doing is not just collecting a huge amount of data we then got to make sense of. Your smartwatch also then presents that in a really simple and easy to digest way. So it's then starting to bring together all of that data, and you can start to see it in a holistic way, and you can start to see how things impact. So actually that one run and that one salad that you eat, you can see straight away that it's making an impact, even though even though your trousers might still not fit. You can see from the data that it's making an impact, and so you're going, right, I'll go again the next day and I'll do it, and I'll keep doing it, and I can keep seeing the impact. So it drives that, it motivates and it drives that much better behavior. So imagine if you could do that with process health.
Yeah, indeed, no, I can see that. So fundamentals then, what do you mean by process health? What are the sort of some of the things you have to look at for that? Because it's not trousers, is it? There's something else which you
exactly. I suppose the first thing to just be to sort of clarify is that when we talk about processes, certainly for us as people who've lived and breathed processes for 20 years, again, I don't want to keep saying that, don't want to keep reminding myself of the 20 years. But we understand fundamentally the difference between the actual work that happens for a process, and the health of a process in that respect might be measured by key performance indicators or process performance indicators. But there's that difference between that and then the documentation that describes the process. We fundamentally understand the difference between that. But for most people in organizations, that trying to think of a process as the work we do is quite abstract. And the process documentation, process maps and so on, it's a tangible thing, right? That people can link those two things together. So I think in this case, we think of those two things, if we think of those two things as essentially being the same. When we talk about process, we're talking about both the work that we do and the documentation or the process maps and diagrams. Then what we can do is we can start to pull together all of that information. So I mentioned KPIs and PPIs, but now we can start to look at what sort of data would be important to understand from the health of the process documentation. And that could be anything from have you clearly identified who a process owner is for that process? Has that process been published? Has it been published recently? Have people been using the process? Have been people looking at it, providing feedback, reviewing it? So suddenly we've got all of this data available, and we can pull that together and start to look at that again in a more holistic way to help us drive better behaviors.
Interesting. So what tangibly is Skore doing, and what is it that we're looking forward to in the future for this?
Well, what we've introduced in Skore is what we're calling as you might guess, the process health tracker. And what it does is it starts to pull together all of those different types of data points. So obviously within Skore, we're capturing all this data in the platform. It starts to pull them together and start to present them in a way that makes it easy to digest, so we can start to understand what's happening. But again, with that idea of trying to improve behavior of everyone within the organization. And so it takes things like that, checking whether things have been updated recently, how new they are, and pulling that together into a simple score that allows you to basically see at a glance where we are, and also how we're performing. And without going into lots and lots of detail, what it does at an individual level, so we can look at the individual health score for a process. And so as individuals, we can look at that, and that tells us something about that process, or whether we can trust it or not. But it also means that different people in different teams can start to look at, okay, well, let's look at that process versus yours and see how they compare to each other. That all starts to create a bit of a gamification effect. And so when different people from different teams start to say, well, what do your processes look like? It's like, well, what can I do to get to move mine forward, or to increase the score of mine? And so we also track that trend over time, so we can look at how how is this score improving, or indeed how is it decreasing, because that might be telling me I need to go and do something to help improve it. But we also take those measures from an individual process level, and we can aggregate that up, and so you can push that right up to an executive or board level, and that might be based on department, business unit, individual process owners. So all processes that belong to a particular process will get an aggregate score for that. And so again, different process owners can compare. We can set targets for the organization so that we've got something to work towards. And again, as a process owner, you're going to be really interested in what happens is, if my score starts to trend down, what do I need to do to get it back up again? Like, why might it be trending down? So those are just some of the kind of simple ways that, again, going back to our individual health, by being able to see all of that information, but again, presented in a simple way, how it can start to help process owners and individuals start to make better decisions, long-term decisions that really help drive ownership and engagement.
It's awesome. I've obviously seen more of it, and yeah, it's just from the couple of screens up here. But that's really fascinating, and I love the way you introduce it as that sort of that gamification at the individual level. I think that's really what's going to be game changing in terms of that longevity of your process library and keeping everything ready. And again, that personal health analogy, I think, works on so many levels. Yeah, you don't want to be finding out that you're unfit a week before a marathon. I think that kind of translates very well to your process library. You don't want to be uncovering loads of problems in your processes just before you're going to upgrade a SAP or merge with another business. I think that's quite
exactly.
Great. Thank you for for giving that overview and that introduction. If you want to know more, if you're an existing customer and want to start playing around with it, or if you're completely new to Skore and you're curious to know more, please do reach out. We're a very approachable bunch. As I say, we've been in this space for more years than I'm going to mention again, and we're more than happy to talk you through some of the use cases, and see if Skore's right or not for you.